Actually, I took the bar exam in Delaware thinking, I kept my options open. I could transfer into D.C., which pretty much allows any bar in the country. If you pass it, you can waive into D.C. So I kept my options open, and then Rob and I went to Europe before I started my clerkship on the Federal Circuit, and so unbeknownst to us, our oldest was conceived there, and so I came back and started on my clerkship on the Federal Circuit. My judge had a stroke, hopefully not my fault, and left the bench shortly after that. He was senior, he wasn't replaced, so I went to Skadden and said, things have changed. And they said, great, come start working our D.C. office. Your options are open. Rob was working on Capitol Hill at that point and had been working for the Christian Legal Society for the 3 years before that. And so we had to make a transition if we were going to move to Delaware. And so I started in the D.C. office, and then about a year later we moved to Delaware. But meanwhile, I thought, this job is killing me. I was so exhausted. And finally it occurred to me to try one of those dipsticks, and I found out that I was almost 3 months pregnant, and so it made it even more sense to move to Delaware. We ended up moving to Delaware in 1990 and started practicing at Skadden Arps in the Court of Chancery. And the Court of Chancery is considered sort of the top business court in the country, and that's because most companies, something like 70% of the Fortune 500 are incorporated under Delaware law, and so the courts in Delaware have a lot to say about that law. And so it's an interesting state because you have high-profile, interesting cases, and you get to have a life sort of with no commute, and we live right across the border in Pennsylvania, and there's beautiful countryside there and that sort of thing. So anyway, worked at Skadden Arps for 9 years. Ended up having my 3 kids while I was working there. Tried the part-time option that sort of was concurrent with part-time. There was 40 hours a week. So it was kind of funny, the memo that went around. Cathy Reese is going to be working part-time 40 hours a week. But anyway, I tried doing that for a while, but it was sort of coincided with when mergers and acquisitions died, and so everybody was sort of working 40 hours a week at that point, and it just it just wasn't working out. So anyway, I ended up going back full time there, and then M&A, mergers and acquisitions, came back, and things went crazy, and something had to give at that point. So I ended up moving to another firm that had a little bit of a better schedule. And Rob had been practicing with a small firm out in Chester County where we lived. He initially went up counsel to get a little more control over his schedule as well, and then ultimately started getting into real estate investing and development, and was able to work from home, and that was great. And worked out really well. As Coach K knows, Rob's a big jock, and so all 3 of our kids are great athletes. He was able to help them with their studies too quite a bit, and they're all 3 straight A students, and they all love the Lord. So it has worked out. We had to balance things a little bit now and then, but I'll talk a little bit more about how we did that. So now I am at Fish & Richardson, which is a patent law firm. Still doing a lot of the corporate litigation, but also doing some patent and technology litigation as well. Fish & Richardson is one of the oldest and largest patent firms in the country. Some of its early clients you might recognize, Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell and the Wright brothers and that sort of thing. So it's an interesting place to work. Last year I had a trial for Microsoft where there was a $3 billion trial against Lucent and then Alcatel-Lucent after the merger. So a lot of interesting cases there, and had some real opportunities. Now I head both the corporate governance and chancery litigation practice at the firm, and a new practice area that I've sort of helped to develop, which is the IP risk management firm. IP is intellectual property. And today's companies have moved from sort of manufacturing companies to more the sort of high-tech kind of companies, and you just see a lot more intellectual property, a lot more patents and trademarks and copyrights and that sort of thing, so that, you know, studies show that 70 to 80% of the average corporation's value now is tied up in intellectual property. And so, you know, it's an exciting area, and part of the fallout from the meltdown on Wall Street a year and a half ago is sort of better risk management practices. The SEC is demanding it. The credit rating agencies are demanding it. Corporate shareholders are demanding it. So part of what we're talking about is how to manage intangible assets like intellectual property and the risk associated with those to preserve the value of those assets for the company. So, you know, that's all sort of my story and where I am now. I don't know if I've mentioned it. We have our kids are ages 20, 17, and going on 14, and great kids. And you know, I think one of the things I'm happiest about, because I never set out to be a career woman, it's sort of just the way the Lord moved things in my life, is, you know, how great my kids have turned out. And how great my marriage is, because that's not the norm, and it does take a lot of work, I think. But you know, the thing I'm proudest of is that how they love the Lord and are committed to Him. But anyway, so some of the tips I've learned along the way. I don't know how many of you have read the book of 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, Covey. I mean, I love that book, and I like how he talks about begin with the end in mind. And so you really want to, and you know, this is odd for someone that started out in nursing and then ended up in law, so it wasn't really like I planned that part of it, but I didn't actually read the book until I was a lawyer, so I have read and tried to plan it since then. But you know, he talks about looking at the end of your life and what you want folks at your funeral to say about you from, you know, a career perspective, from your family's perspective, from a faith perspective. There was one other, but sort of thinking about and actually writing your own eulogy and thinking about where you want to end up, and then sort of creating your own roadmap, and also sort of triaging your day around your goals in life, ultimately. And so you sort of rank all the stuff coming at you, emails and phone calls and everything, sort of like, is it important? And important means, is it consistent with my goals, what I want, where I want to get, and is it urgent? And the things that are important and urgent get first priority. And he has sort of a